Welcome aboard to the Jewish Insights for the Parsha of Boy. This week we have a fascinating and provoking conversation that you guys need to get ready for. So, welcome to the new participants on our class. We're glad to have so many people here with us, and we're glad to have the old ones back. Welcome aboard. The Korban Pesach, the sacrifice brought to celebrate Passover. Everyone's heard of the holiday of Passover, typically around April time. Celebrated always, it begins in Talmudic and in temple times with a sacrifice of a lamb. The verses of our portion of the Torah this week have spoken at introducing this instruction from God that we sacrifice the special Pesach sacrifice. It has a different procedure from all the other sacrifices. It has a different way of consumption. It is unique. Okay, we're not today going to talk about the details of the sacrifice. However, we will talk about what the effect of the sacrifice was on the people who were around the Jews during the first time they sacrificed this special offering. And that would have been in Egypt moments before the miraculous departure of the Jewish people from the land of Egypt. So if you've got your source notes in front of you, we're going to start straight away with source number 1. And it's really an introduction to the sacrifice. The sacrifice itself is, as we will see, it's a sacrifice. But there's something unique in this situation. We know that the people of Egypt, the local Egyptians, revered the sheep, the animal, as a god. They considered it a deity. Similar to how if one went to India today, they would find that people sacrifice and not sacrifice, but worship and respect the cow. And so in Egypt, they respected the sheep. So much so that when the Jewish people went to go get their own sheep, it created quite a ruckus in the land. And that's going to be the beginning of our conversation. So open up source number 1, the book of Exodus, chapter 3, verses 6 to 8. This is the introduction to the sacrifice and how it should be prepared. So I'm going to ask Professor Blumenthal, can you read for us, please, source number 1, these 4 verses?
Sure. Speak to the entire community of Israel, saying, on the 10th of this month, let each one take a sheep for each extended family, a sheep for each household. Hold it for inspection until the 14th day of this month. The entire community of Israel shall then slaughter their sacrifices in the afternoon. They must take the blood and place it on the 2 doorposts and on the beam above the door of the houses in which they will eat the sacrifice. Eat the sacrificial meat during the night, roast it over fire, eat it with matzah and bitter herbs.
Thank you, Rabbi Shmuel. And so we move into source number 2, and this, though it is an excerpt from the Code of Jewish Law authored by Rabbi Shneir Zalman of Liadi, nevertheless, what it actually is it's a kind of review or description, an in-depth description of what the sacrifice experience may have been like, how it started, how it ends, what happens in between. So reading, please, in the English side, let's ask Ron, can you read for us, please, source number 2?
Number 2. We call the Shabbat that precedes Passover Shabbat Hagadol, the great Shabbat, because a great miracle occurred on that day. The sheep for the Paschal sacrifice was purchased on the 10th day of the month of Nisan, as the Torah says. On the 10th of this month, each of them shall take a sheep for a family. The day was a Shabbat, for the Jews left Egypt on a Thursday, as explained in section 494. And since the 15th of Nisan was a Thursday, the 10th of Nisan fell out on Shabbat. When the Jews took the sheep for their Paschal sacrifice on Shabbat, the Egyptian firstborns gathered around and asked the Jews, "Why are you doing this?" The Jews answered, "It is a Paschal sacrifice to God, who will soon slay every firstborn of Egypt." The firstborn of each family begged their parents and Pharaoh to release the Jews, but they refused. And the firstborn waged war against Pharaoh and his supporters and slew many. The verse, "to strike Egypt with their firstborn," alludes to this. The rabbis established the commemoration of this miracle for the future generations on the Shabbat preceding Passover and called it Shabbat Hagadol.
Thank you, Ron, for that eloquent reading. That was great. So we know how the Jews needed to go get it. We understand now that this was actually quite insightful for another population living with the Jews, perhaps not the most peaceful living together, but nevertheless, they lived in the same town, they lived in the same country. And when all of the non-Jews, all of the local Egyptians saw that the Jewish people were collecting their sacrifice, they started a whole tumult. They made a big deal about it, and they tried to get the Jews let out of Egypt because they knew that what would happen next would not be good. All the firstborns would be killed as God promised. Effectively, what happens? The elders and Pharaoh say, absolutely not, we will not let them out. And so the young ones, the firstborns, then take up arms and deal with the non-permission granted for what they want. This brings us into source number 3, where we're going to get a couple more details about the war that took place between the firstborns of Egypt and their fathers and Pharaoh. So let's ask Diana, can you read for us, please, source number 3?
Yeah, I could read it. I had to unmute myself. Hold on. Source 3, Midrash Tefillin, chapter 136. The firstborns went to their fathers and said, "All of Moses' predictions have come to fruition. Do you not wish that we survive? Let's release these Hebrews from among us. If not, we die." Their fathers replied, "Even if every Egyptian dies, the Jews don't leave." What do the firstborn do then? They went screaming to Pharaoh, "We beg you, let this nation out. Because of them, evil will fall us." And you, Pharaoh, was also a firstborn. Pharaoh refused and told his servants, "Go cut off their legs." What did the firstborn do then? They immediately went out to take their swords and kill their fathers, as the verse says, to strike Egypt with their firstborn. It doesn't say to strike Egypt's firstborn. Instead, it says with their firstborn, which alludes to 600,000 Egyptians that was slain by their firstborn.
Thank you, Diana. That's great. So now that we have this review of the history, what the experience might have been like to collect that sacrifice, to store it, to hold on to it, and then the effect and the influence and the responses of the people, and finally the uprising that ensues, we need to now come forward and understand what is a message that we can learn from this internal uprising in a way that Egypt is self-destructing. So that's the coming up conversation. Before we go there, I want to ask if anyone has something that they know, perhaps something. What do you know so far or before today's class about the Korban Pesach, about the sacrifice of Pesach? What do you know about this internal war, and what do you know about perhaps why or what this has to teach us? If anybody has something to share, now is the perfect time.
I'm enamored with the fact, if I may, that you have to eat every bit of the Korban Pesach. You cannot scratch the bones. So you have a chore in getting the meat off without doing any damage to the bones of the korban.
Right, so that is definitely a unique factor that comes to the sacrifice of Pesach, that you cannot leave any meat from the Pesach over. It's all going to be eaten. At the same time, you can't break the bones. So it's kind of somewhere in between. Go figure how they did it. When Mashiach comes, hopefully well before this year's Passover, we will have an opportunity to figure this one out all together. And
Proportion brought down that they boiled to get it off the bone.
I think what we're going to do is we're going to have a rural Georgia table at this Pesach sacrifice for bringing. Okay. So
when my husband makes soup, he buys flanken and the meat falls off the bones.
that's it.
So that's one way to get it off.
That's definitely one way. But in this case, there's a lot more than flanking that you have to deal with. There could have been 30 to 40 people on one lamb,
Yeah.
just in order to ensure that nothing was left over. Reb Shmuel, Brian, Alan, a comment. Michael, a comment. Anyone?
I have a question.
Go for it, Brian.
Okay, so in this firstborn, I'm assuming they didn't win. So then a lot of the firstborn would have had to been slain just in the battle. So it would kind of be like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So, I mean, or does it allude to that in the Midrash, or do you know?
What the end of this war was, I don't know, but it was definitely an effective war, and it dealt with a lot of the Egyptian presence. I don't know who was taken out more. That part we don't know. I mean, I don't know.
But the footnote says 600,000 were slain of the
out of a population that filled the entire Egypt. So, how much was that? I don't know. Hard to say. Okay, we're moving on into self-destruction, a comment from the Rebbe, and what I'd like to do is just take a quick look at source number 4. So turn a little bit of the page to source 4 so that you can see it's right. For me, it's right at the top, and you can see this is a little digression in a way. It's a little bit going away from, but since it's mentioned in this quote from the Rebbe, we want to know what it means first. And the words are, and this is, as people say, this is an idiom that people say, from and within the forest comes the axe to it. And what that means is that as the handle for the axe that chops the tree is from the forest itself, the very thing that will chop down the entire tree came from the tree. And we're going to see how the Rebbe uses this in our paragraph of self-destruction, and then we'll continue with the second paragraph. And let's ask Alan, can you read for us, please? Self-destruction, 3 paragraphs.
Unique feature of the great miracle that occurred on the Shabbat before Passover is that the killing of the Egyptians was performed by the firstborn Egyptians themselves, as the verse states, to strike Egypt with their firstborn. It is considered an exceptional miracle because other miracles occur through the intervention of an external force. For example, the plague of the firstborns occurred when God struck all the firstborns in the land of Egypt. Similarly, regarding the miracle of Purim, Haman's decree was thwarted not by Haman himself, but by Mordecai and Esther operating through the natural guise of Esther requesting it from Ahasuerus. The same is true regarding Hanukkah, when the Hasmoneans defeated the Greek Empire. This is true in many more cases, in the battle between nations when one rises, the other one falls. The miracle of Shabbat Hagadol, however, occurred through the Egyptians themselves. The handle of the axe comes from the forest itself. The firstborn Egyptians, the choicest and most powerful people in Egypt, were the ones who struck Egypt. This represents the absolute abrogation of the natural order, and it is therefore termed a great miracle.
Thank you, Alan. So recognizing that there's a massive miracle happened here, what is the nature of this miracle? Typically when a miracle happens, it happens from somewhere outside and it comes in. So thinking through Jewish history, we have a couple of moments where the Jewish people were in stark danger, and the change, the saving, the salvation came from elsewhere. So the Rebbe brings 3 examples. There is Haman with Purim. Haman is the one who is bringing on the trouble. It's not like Haman turns around in the middle and changes the plans and saves the day. Rather, it's Mordechai and Esther that come in later with whatever guys they have to save the day on behalf of, for the Jewish people, but they're an external force coming in to help. And the same thing happens with the Hashmonaim, the Hasmoneans during Hanukkah. The Greek Empire is troubling the Jewish people, and it is the Maccabees that come in afterwards externally and save the day for the Jewish people as a tribute, a present from God. But nevertheless, and here, this is different. Our story is different. This section of the Torah tells us a different story. That the danger that was presented to the Jewish people was from the Egyptians, and it is the very same people, the Egyptians themselves, that are self-destructing, annihilating themselves and their own families in order to protect and save the Jewish people. So the big question now is, in the next paragraph, what did the Jews do to deserve this great miracle? How does this come to be? So let's ask, we'll start again. We'll go to Brian. Brian, can you read for us, please? What did the Jews do? Do you have that page?
I'm sorry, I did not do the homework.
You didn't do the homework, okay. All right, so then we will exclude you from the opportunity of reading, Brian. But I hope that next time, please come prepared. You will, okay, good on you, mate. Okay, so let's start again. Ron.
All right.
What did the Jews do?
What did the Jews do to deserve this great miracle? However, everything in this world is affected by the divine service of the Jewish people. Every godly intervention is the result of our behavior in this world. Even a miracle which transcends our abilities and thus seems unrelated to our divine service requires some form of related action on our part. The concept is expressed in the teachings that God presents only presence. God's presence only tests in the perfect place. It is therefore clear that the great miracle of the Shabbat before Pesach must also have been preceded by some form of a human endeavor.
Talking about presents and gifts, we have a Hasidic insight on the motivation for a gift. And this is source number 5. Although a gift comes because of the desire of the giver to give, A wants to give something to B. However, A only wants to give something to B because he is reciprocating something that he received from B. B somehow gave, and now A is returning. Which means ultimately that the gift is a result of the receiver's action. A gift is only given to someone who is worthy of it. But it's called a gift because the recipient only caused pleasure to his friend, causing by extension the giving of the gift. He didn't compel the gift, nor can he demand it in return for his deeds. It's up to the goodwill of the other individual. In other words, the gift does not directly correlate to the endeavors of the recipient. The gift is an extra. It's like a bonus. It's a bonus that you nearly earned. We could put that in inverted commas. Yeah, you did something for it, but now that you've got it, it's kind of a surprise. You weren't expecting it, and you've got it. It doesn't belong to anybody else. It's yours, but you earned it in a way. So the same is true in our story in the Torah with this Egyptian war. Yes, it's a miracle. It is a miracle that that God protects the Jewish people with making this war and with getting the Egyptian firstborns to rise up against their own fathers and attack and protect the Jewish people in that way. Yet, even while it's a gift and a miracle, we need to understand, how did the Jews earn this miracle? How does it come that this is the next step for the Jewish people? And so that brings us into section B. And here it is, the repudiation of idolatry. So let's ask, Diana, can you read for us, please, this paragraph? You're on mute still?
Yeah, I have to go back and forth, so
Okay.
I'll read it. So which one was it that you wanted to read?
The repudiation of idolatry.
The repudiation of idolatry. The answer to this is given by the Alter Rebbe in his Code of Jewish Law. He describes how the Jews purchased the sheep for the Paschal sacrifice on Shabbat, the 10th of the month, and when the firstborn Egyptians confronted the Jews and asked them why they were taking sheep. The Jews replied that they were doing so in observance of Hashem's command to take a sheep and slaughter it as a Paschal offering. As explained in the commentaries, sheep were worshipped as a Hashem in Egypt, and this was a commandment for the Jews to abandon idol worship. Essentially, the Jews were saying outright, I'm going to slaughter my idol, which is your idol as well.
Thank you, Diana. So, do you think that the Jewish people had been influenced at all during their 200 plus year long exile and in slavery? Were the Jewish people influenced by the Egyptians? Raise of hand if you think they were not. No influence at all, no change in culture, no change in behavior. You think so? By no raise of hand, I understand that everyone thinks they were influenced somewhat.
Tremendously.
Ron says tremendously. Okay, well, you guys all got it right. Yes, the Jewish people were influenced somewhat, although there may have been some who remained righteous and stuck to the ways of God, etc. However, a vast majority of them, so much so that God needs to make a special focus and commandment on it, a vast majority of the Jewish people had taken up idolatry, following the same customs that the regular people of Egypt were up to. And so, what was everybody doing? Everyone was worshiping the sheep. So were the Jews. In fact, we're going to see in source number 6, the Jews were so sunken in idolatry that at the time of splitting the sea, the Zohar recounts a conversation between the angels and God, and it says, God, how can you take them out of Egypt? The Egyptians did the same things. The Jews and the Egyptians did the same thing. How can you hurt the Egyptians, drown them in the ocean, when the Jewish people are out scot-free? And we're going to discover that in a way, the commandment of God to sacrifice the sheep was an instruction to the Jew to purge themselves, to cleanse themselves of an idolatry that they had picked up. So let's take a look. Zohar, source number 6, Zohar Parsha Teruma. Let's ask Robert, can you please read for us source number 6?
Yes, when the Jews approached the water and God wanted to split the Red Sea, the angel that ministered over Egypt came to God and requested justice. He said, Master of the world, why do you wish to punish Egypt and split the sea for the Jews? They are all guilty. Your ways are with justice and truth. The Egyptians serve idols and the Jews serve idols. The Egyptians commit improper marital relations and the Jews also commit improper marital relations. The Egyptians commit murder and the Jews also commit murder.
Thank you, Reb Shmuel. And we move into source number 7, which shows us yet again another perhaps source or proof that the Jewish people were worshiping the sheep Alan, can you read for us source number 7?
Okey doke. Moses summoned the elders of Israel and said to them, "Draw forth the people and get yourselves sheep for your families so that you will be able to slaughter the Paschal offering." The Midrash, "Draw forth the people and get yourselves sheep." Rabbi Yossi of the Galilee explained, "Draw forth from idol worship and connect yourself to God's commandments."
Very cool. So here in the verse, the Midrash reads in a message. It says, draw forth. What does draw forth mean? In a way, draw forth means remove yourself. Go away from one thing. Well, if you're going away from somewhere, you must go to something else. Where should you go? Go to the mitzvah. Draw forth. Get yourself the Pesach. Draw forth from where you are and go get the sacrificial lamb. And that brings us to source number 8. And this one, every Jew took a sheep as a Paschal offering. And they tied it to their bedposts. The Egyptians asked them, "What is this about?" And they responded, "Slaughter for an offering upon God's command." The Egyptians watched helplessly as their God was being prepared for the slaughter. The Egyptians were kind of lost. They didn't know what to do. Their idol was being led to the slaughter like sheep. What were they to do? They were shocked. And hence, the big deal, the big ruckus that they create. But now what we're going to do is we're going to find out a couple of lessons that we each can pull up from this message, from this experience. And for this, let us begin with Diana. Can you read for us, please, what changed now? 2 paragraphs.
What changed now? The box famously asks the Jews ate meat throughout their time in Egypt. As we find that Moshe said to Pharaoh, "We will go with your sheep and cattle." This implies that the Jews owned animals and would slaughter and eat them. They obviously couldn't eat meat together with the Egyptians because the Egyptians could not eat bread together with the Jews. They considered it an abomination, but the Jews themselves consumed meat while they lived in the Egyptian region of Goshen, not just during the lifetime of Joseph, but throughout the 210 years of slavery in Egypt. The Egyptians were fully aware of this. What then was unique about Shabbat HaGadol, when the Jews said they were going to slaughter a sheep? Why does this silence the Egyptians?
Major question. Thank you, Diana. Big question here. What do you mean? The Jews have been eating meat all this time. They've clearly been hanging out with their shepherds. They've been taking their cows and sheep all over the place. They've probably been eating. No reason to assume they haven't. How come suddenly now the Egyptians are getting tzahakt? How come suddenly now the Egyptians are upset or shocked that the Jews are eating meat? Is it so surprising that the Jewish people have become carnivorous? Major question. So let's see, in the powerful statement of faith, we're going to discover the ultimate notion, the ultimate expression that the Jewish people are saying in this whole saga. For this, let's ask Ron, will you please read for us a powerful statement of faith?
The answer is that throughout their time in Egypt, the Jews explained their meat consumption by saying that they liked meat. On Shabbos HaGadol, they were on such a level that they were unashamed and unafraid to say clearly, "I am going to slaughter your idol." They are able to do so because they are slaughtering their own adulterous belief. The Jews could have responded ambiguously, like diplomats speak, or they could have simply remained silent and allowed the Egyptians to interpret their actions as they wished. But the Jews were unashamed and unafraid, and stated clearly that they are going to fulfill God's commandment to abandon idol worship and slaughter the Paschal sacrifice. Slaughtering the God of Egypt, they did so even though they were still in Egypt, knowing that they still had to wait a few days until the great miracle of Egypt being struck with its firstborns. The conduct is what caused
just a moment, Ron.
Yes.
A little interruption right here. The Rebbe has told us a very important lesson. In truth, it was not a test for the Jews to slaughter and eat the sheep. That wasn't the big deal that they ate the sheep. The Egyptians already knew that the Jews were eating sheep. That's no secret. However, the announcement that the Jews had made, the announcements that the Jews were telling everybody, demanded a high level of self-sacrifice. It takes courage to announce that we're going to do so, eat meat, as a religious act. This is a commandment from God. And in effect, we're now drawing away, we're leaving from the idol worship. In effect, the Jewish people, with this performance of collecting the sheep and bringing it as a sacrifice, they are making a statement. And they're not embarrassed to make the statement. They say it out loud. They say it with action. They're rebelling against the idol of Egypt. Ron, last paragraph, take it away.
This conduct is what caused the great miracle of striking the Egyptians through their firstborns on the Shabbat before Pesach, the Shabbat from which all of the days of the following week are blessed, including the day of the actual exodus from Egypt.
Awesome. Thank you, Ron. So that concluded the Sikha. But now we've got a couple of messages that we've got to pick up over here. So the Jews merited the miracle of a revolt in the Egyptian ranks because they did a similar uprising of their own. They did something on their own that earned what happened to them. Throughout the many years in Egypt, many of the Jewish nations sunk deep into the Egyptian culture and they served their idols.
49th Madregas.
That's right. And the Kabbalah tells us that the Jewish people were at the 49th level of impurity. And had they lasted even one more moment in exile, they would have been stuck forever. They would have been in the 50th gate, it says. But to merit the exodus from Egypt, they needed to detach themselves from their addiction to the idol worship, and they needed to connect with God. When they fulfilled the commandment of purchasing the sheep and keeping it in the house for 4 days and then slaughtering it, in effect, they were declaring their separation from the idols, and they were announcing and making known their connection with God Almighty. This is a profound process. And this gave them the courage to tell the Egyptians up front, we are going to slaughter your idol. This internal withdrawal from idol worship, done in a very straightforward way, without any diplomacy and without apologies, was what brought for the people one of the most unique miracles of the Jewish history. That the enemy themselves, the firstborn, the very enemy that they were suffering under, waged a rebellion within their ranks. So, my friends, we have 2 points that we can learn from here. Number one is a matter of Jewish pride. Jewish pride is nearly a registered trademark. So let's use that one. Many Jews are proud of their Judaism, and most of the time choose to do good and be involved with Jewish and Israel affairs. However, we often encounter situations where it's difficult to say out loud, yes, I'm Jewish. Sometimes we think to ourselves, no, you know what? Not everyone has to know that I'm Jewish. I don't need to tell everybody that I'm involved in these things. What matters is what I do for the Jewish nation. and my actual connection. I'll be proud of my own Judaism at home and like every other person on the street. That might be the position a person takes. Why do I need to be out there? Let me be Jewish at home. Let me be proud at home. Let me take care and give my donation to JNF or whichever other Jewish organization sparks your bell. But when I go outside, no one needs to know. We don't need to make a big deal about it. But the story featured in our Parsha, this episode with the sheep, tells us that although the purchase and slaughter were vital in itself as a commandment from God, it was the announcement that was being made wherein that was so much more special. This was the purpose of the commandment. A Jew should tell himself, and he should tell the Egyptians that are watching him, I'm done with the idols, and now I'm going to serve God.
They put their kippah back on.
They got out there with their kippahs and their flags and their stars of David and all of their Jewish looking stuff. And they said, we are not anymore going to be influenced and suffocated by our oppressors. And you know what? The mitzvahs that we do are very special. And the belief in Hashem, when we perform his commandments that are pure and holy, this stuff is very important. But sometimes it's the announcement that comes with it that's really making all the difference. The importance of not being intimidated by our Jewish identity and being proud of our good deeds is both of us personally and for the young generation that who we're educating to follow in our ways. We need to teach them these things. We've got to do the good deed. We've got to do the mitzvah, and we've got to do it proudly. You know, like up in Blue Ridge, there was a menorah in the center of town. We weren't embarrassed about our Judaism. Far cares, completely opposite. We were very proud about it. And I believe it stayed up for quite a while, if it's not still up. And that's a big deal. It's a sign of Jewish pride. Alan, is it still up?
It stayed up through January 1st. We took it down January 2nd.
I love it. Awesome. I think it's the longest, it's the second or longest standing menorah in Georgia so far.
Oh, in Georgia.
In Georgia. No, we're not talking about the rest of the world. We don't know if New Jersey beat us to anything yet. We'll figure that out later. But there is a second lesson to be learned from our story here. And that is to show by example. You know, we say that that one action speaks much, actions speak louder than words. And in this situation, the Jewish people, they didn't say, oh yeah, we'll do it. We're committed. I'll be there for you when you need me. They went out, they got the sheep, they tied it to their beds, and they made the statement with behavior saying, we are going to disconnect from the idol worship of the sheep, and we're going to connect with the commandment that God has given. These two lessons, number one, being proud that we're Jewish and allowing that pride to be seen publicly. And number two, showing by example in performing our mitzvahs in public, in wearing our yarmulke outdoors, keeping your kippah on, even when you're outside. What's another example of being Jewish out in the open? If you've got tzitzit, wearing your tzitzit outside.
Rabbi,
If you have to work, if you're working still, right, and your employer says, what do you mean? It's Saturday, I need you to do this job. And you say, listen, mate, I'm sorry, it's Shabbos, and I'm a proud Jew. I won't work on Shabbos. Like the famous song, ain't gonna work on Saturday, ain't gonna work on Saturday, double, triple, quadruple, babe, won't make me work on Saturday. Ain't gonna work on Saturday, why? Because it's Shabbos Kodesh. And another great example is eating kosher in your workplace. If you go to work, if you're in the teacher lounge and people say, hey, yo, what do you got for lunch? Right? And so everybody else is talking about pork chops. And the Jewish man says, oh, I've got kosher tuna. I've got kosher pizza. I don't know what. When you say it out loud, I've got the kosher. When you're making a statement, yes, I'm proud to be Jewish and I'm going to do what I need to do. This is the involvement that this lesson, this part of the Parsha has taught us. And so, my friends, I bless us all, each one of us on our level. We can improve our Jewish pride and our physical, behavioral participation in the commandments given to us by God that we are so lucky to have. And may we be blessed to have the inner strength to perform the commandments, to stand by them, and to not be influenced or held back by the people around us. Thank you very much for joining. I look forward to seeing you all.
I have a story to say.